Mario, Celeste, Putty Squad. What do these three have in common, other than being the greatest games on the planet? They are all 2D platformers. 2D platformers might be the most explored genre of game design, both in their own genre and through other genres such as Metroidvanias or roguelikes. Their mechanics differ, their aesthetics differ, but one thing remains the same: movement. Stripped down, movement in 2D platformers consists of the ability to run and jump. However, each game in the genre tackles that concept in a different way. Mario is floaty and forgiving, Celeste is pinpoint and precise, and Putty Squad is this. Although they all tackle the similar task of moving, they are all perceived differently because each game is achieving a distinct feel. So when given the challenge to replicate and iterate on Celeste movement, where the base movement we are given doesn't feel nearly as responsive or intuitive, how do we make something that feels good to play yet stand on its own? Well, we start by studying the greats. Before we can experiment with our own movement, we need to establish what we observe is good. Polishing what feels lacking allows us to gain understanding of the base movement from the starter code, iteratively breaking down why the base movement seems worse than the original and improving those details, leading towards our destination of the vision, which landed us in space. Welcome to God of Moon, a game where you play as Space Cat, floating through both low and high gravity at your whimsy, all at the press of a button. To get to this point, we had to take a bit of a trek. The base movement system has two methods for the player's jump. The original jump changed the rigid body's Y velocity by increasing the Y positional vector multiplied by a jump force. This does give the player the ability to jump, but feels unsatisfying since the player would have the same linear motion. The second method, called better jumping, changes the gravity depending on player input, making the jump feel less floaty and more precise. Celeste's movement is known to be dynamic and detailed, and to enable that, the player's controls should feel intuitive. In the base movement provided to us, a player can move in 4 directions with the arrow keys, dash only when a player is moving in a direction, and press the left mouse button, grab and climb the walls with the shift key, and jump with the spacebar. We remapped all movement to the keyboard for more accessibility and easier control. Our current control scheme is as follows: WASD to move, spacebar to jump, shift to grab and climb, and arrow keys to dash in the direction corresponding to the arrow or arrows you hit. This also allowed us to implement a backwards dash and diagonal dash, giving a wider range of direction and a higher sensation of control. To keep the responsive and fluid motion, coyote jumps were added to our polished movement. Coyote jumps give the player some leeway, as they still have the ability to jump a couple frames after running off a platform. This gives our jumps some polish by making them seem more precise, emulating the swift feel in Celeste's movement system. Speaking of swift moves, adjusting the turn acceleration was another factor for reactive gameplay. Altering the original turn acceleration from this to a higher turn acceleration like this builds a more satisfying experience and results in increased responsiveness. Stubbing your foot is an experience we hope that many of you will not have to experience, but alas, it happens. Our polished movement includes toe stub forgiveness, having a few frames of leeway to keep moving from platform to platform. This prevents that encounter of a sudden stop when you swear you cleared that corner. The placement of the camera is integral in platformers. It highlights the character's maneuvers within the level. We have our camera follow the player to create an active ambience, as there's a visual indicator to the player's response as they move around. It also allows for some explorative level design, as the whole level isn't always visible, meaning the player may have to look around in order to find out where to go next. Adding visual details heightens the motion as they help convey the physical reality in our game world. Having a squash and stretch animation highlights our jump movement by giving visual feedback, making the jump feel bouncy. Sound effects help the player know when specific actions are being taken, so in our game, we use sound effects to highlight the jump and dash mechanics, like so. All these implementations come together in order to create a smooth, fluid game where platforming can shine despite the limitations of the base code. Now, onto our distinct changes. One piece we want to highlight is our decision for the dashes to be faster, which in turn makes them go further than before. This decision, in conjunction with our decision to make jumps have less gravity and high turn acceleration, allows the player to feel like they are no longer on Earth but rather in space. The dash in particular is what allows the player to beat the level, as traversal relies on it more heavily than the based or polished movement. Now I know you must be thinking at this point, but all of this seemed to come so easily to you. Is that because of the base code? No, as a matter of fact, the base code was our biggest doubter and stopped us from making even more changes that we think would have increased the enjoyment derived from playing God of Moon. If anything, the fact that we were able to work around the, honestly, terrible base code is even more reason for you to consider hiring us, since if we can make something this good off of that, imagine what we could make with your fantastic projects. Thank you for your time and considering us for the cut. Have a wonderful night and stay classy.